Hello and welcome to the Creative Academy. I'm Eileen Cook and I'm here today with Susin Nielsen, author of No Fixed Address, We're All Made of Molecules, and one of my favorites, Word Nerd. And she has with her today a special furry companion.
I
Are
do.
we,
This is Emily Bronte.
of
Emily.
course, a literary name,
Yes, of course. Yes. Oh, there she goes. That was it.
Yeah, that was a brief, it was kind of like, what do you call it? Just a little snapshot there.
Yes, exactly.
So thanks for coming, Susan, to talk with us today. So we're with the Creative Academy, so we have a bunch of people who are all at different sort of stages of their writing journey. And I'm just kind of curious, how did you get into writing? And I know that you kind of come from a screenwriting background, and I'm curious if that played a big part or how that worked.
Yeah, well, I always wanted to be a writer, like from the time of being, I think, like 11 years old. I was, my very first paragraph in my very first diary said, "This is the first day I've really written in a diary. The reason I am is because I love writing stories. And if I do grow up to be a famous writer and later die, and they want to get a story of my life, I guess I should keep a diary."
So
So,
I'm going to make you laugh. My first diary entry, and I'm paraphrasing it because I can't remember exactly. First off, I called my diary Kitty. So I was like, "Dear Kitty, I am calling you Kitty because Anne Frank called her diary Kitty, and her
oh,
diary became a best-selling novel. I would like if mine did, but there's no war." And then
oh
it
my
goes on.
God.
So, that's just me with, my personal story of the
Oh,
Holocaust that was fourth grade. That was
oh
as
my,
awful as I had to deal with it.
oh
So,
my God, that is hilarious. All right. Well, yours beats mine.
oh, I don't know about that, but
Mine,
I'm pretty
mine just
sure.
said Susan Nielsen, the spy on the inside cover because I wanted to be like Harriet the spy.
Yes, very good choice, Harriet the
Yes,
Spy. But you were telling us, and I interrupted you about
totally fun.
how you became a writer. So you always wanted to do it, and if screenwriting was an impact on that at all. So how did you get from your journal diary entry to where you are now, your little shelf of books behind you?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, uh, I I took creative writing classes, but there were years when I didn't think I was going to write at all. I thought I was going to be an actress, and then I thought I was going to be in broadcast journalism. But all the while, I was still writing. But I don't honestly know, aside from my diary entry, I don't think I thought of it necessarily as a career.
Yeah.
But I went to Ryerson. I took radio and television arts, and I got some work working on like really schlocky BBB straight to video horror movies, and I loved working in that world. Believe it or not, of like make believe.
Yeah.
And I was trying to write screenplays, and then I got hired on the first season of Degrassi Junior High to do craft services, and
Yes,
uh,
I've heard of your muffins. You were apparently a brand muffin queen. Is that true?
yes, that was I did craft services, and the kids on the show wrote a poem to me at the end of the first season, an ode to Susan, the brand muffin queen. We eat them, we die, then we turn green. So I figured they probably weren't going to hire me back to do craft services. So I thought, okay, well, wow, my cats are making a lot of noise. I'm sorry.
That's all right. It just adds
Um,
to the ambiance.
yeah, okay, perfect. They clearly think it's time for supper, so now they're starting to fight.
Yeah.
Um, and I wrote a spec script between first and second season because I really wanted to work on the show again in some capacity. And I gave it to the head writer, and he didn't think much of that script actually, but he saw a spark in my writing. So he gave me a shot at writing an episode, and then that turned into 16 episodes of Degrassi Junior High and High. And it's also where I got my first shot at writing books because they did these novelizations.
Okay.
And so I wrote four of the Degrassi books. I wrote Shane, Wheels, Snake, and Melanie. Yeah. And I always thought if I met Margaret Atwood, I would love to be able to say, "Oh, Peggy, you may know me as the author of." Um,
Melanie.
yes, exactly. And then my TV career kind of took off, but I always had this idea that one day I would love to write an original young adult novel. And then there was a lull in my TV work, and I was being really moany and complaining. at home, about, just waiting for the phone to ring, and, why, just nobody seemed to be wanting to hire me at that point. And then I thought, what are you doing? You're a writer. Like, why are you waiting for other people to
Interesting.
tell you what you're going to work on? Why don't you just write something, you idiot? And so I thought, okay, well, it's now or never. And I wrote, Ambrose had been talking to me for a while from Word Nerd. And so I finally sat down and wrote Word Nerd.
And I love that book, by the way.
Thank
Like,
you.
what made you interested in writing for kids or young adults? Like, what is it that appeals to you about writing for that age group?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but I did write for a lot of teen and tween shows.
Yeah.
So and I was like, when I started on Degrassi, I think I wrote my first script when I was 23.
Yeah.
So I feel like somehow that age group got really imprinted on my brain when I wasn't too far out of the age group
Yeah.
myself. Um, and I just find it's such a fascinating time, right? Like, it's just such a time of firsts, and um, uh, you're trying to discover yourself. Um, you tend to be reasonably self-oriented, and not in a bad way. Um, and since all of my books are first-person narrative, I think I can really use that to full effect. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's just where I gravitate.
Yeah. I love the intensity. Like, that's for me. Like, sometimes people ask me the same question. It's like,
Yeah,
when you're a teenager and you fall in love, it's like no one has ever been in love like that before. And
yeah,
when someone rips your heart out and you feel like you're going to die, like, you don't actually know you're going to survive. Like, when you're older, it's still the same amount of hurt, right? But like, you've been around before, like, like, I will get through this.
yeah,
But when you're 16 or 17 and someone rips your heart out for the first time, like, you actually aren't sure you're going to survive it.
yeah. You can't. You're not ready yet to believe Gloria Gaynor.
Yeah. You might be dating yourself there, my friend.
Oh well, one look at my face and I'm dating myself.
And I also find it interesting, like, I'm curious if you get any pushback from people around. One of my most favorite comments that I didn't know exactly how to respond to is, I was on a panel, and I was the only YA writer on the panel. And one of the questions from the audience was someone who said, I've read your books and you're really good. And I'm curious if you're ever going to write a real novel, or do you think you'll continue to write for teens? And I just sort of felt like I had no idea I'd been writing fake novels for all this time. Like, I was like, write a real novel. Sure. Like, it was just, I'm curious if you've had any of that kind of pushback at all.
I have had comments like that. I don't think anybody's ever said, "When are you going to write a real novel?" But I've definitely had, and like, even like good friends of mine have sometimes said, "So when are you ever going to write a novel for adults?" And I know they mean well. I know they don't mean to insult, but it is a little insulting, because it's like they're sort of saying, when are you going to write the real book?
Yeah.
When are you going to write your, I don't know, like your legacy book or something like that? And
Find it interesting.
um and I feel like, first of all, I feel like my books, and many middle grade YA books, they can be read by anybody.
Yeah.
you know yes, we're slotted into that niche, but we both know, what is it, it's at least a third of YA readership are adults. And so, for me, it's about writing a good novel.
Yeah.
It's not about who it's for. And I've read books that I love that I guess would be categorized as, YA, but they're just damn good reads and
Yeah.
well
I
written.
really don't even think about it. Like, people, like, I
Mm.
don't necessarily sit down and think like, well, I'm writing a YA, so I need to think about these things. Like, I know that that's what I'm doing because I'm usually under contract, so I know they're expecting a YA novel at the end of
Mhm.
it. But I'm just writing a story that I want to tell, where the protagonist just happens to be a teenager. Like, that's tends to be what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. You tend to write funny. which I like about you. Do you think it just comes easier for you? Like, are there people who are funny and people who aren't funny?
Well, I would venture to say yes. And I guess like by that I mean I think about some of the writers that I have really enjoyed. And now I'm going to try to think of one that didn't write funny at all, who I loved. But well, I mean, I don't know, like Wuthering Heights probably didn't have a lot of laughs as far as
No,
I recall.
not a big chuckle. No.
No. Um, uh, so that's not to say like Emily, I'm talking about Emily Bronte again. It's so easy. My cat, and now talking about her novel, but maybe Emily and her sisters had a great deal of laughs growing up in the parsonage, right? But as a writer, her view, her perspective, wasn't necessarily one that was full of laughs. Whereas, so I do sort of feel like it comes. It took me a long time to find my voice,
Okay.
but I feel like once I found um, my voice absolutely comes with a certain amount of humor. And I couldn't imagine writing a story without humor. And I would say that most of what I like to read, even when it can be rather heavy, it also does have some humor too. So,
Yeah. I was having a conversation with a mutual friend of ours, Robin Harding, and we were talking about, there's all these different aspects of writing, right? So there's, dialogue and pacing and plotting and humor and all this kind of stuff. And that writers, if you're lucky, you have one or two areas that just come easier for you. So,
right.
Robin was talking about, for her, that's always been dialogue. Like if she's stuck, she goes to a dialogue scene. And, I just think sometimes if something, like I used to fight because humor shows up in a lot of my writing, and I would sort of try and take it out because I was trying to be a serious writer
Oh,
and
yeah.
have something to say. And I suddenly realized, like, no, that's just because it comes easy to me doesn't mean it's not equally as important or as valuable. And it helps in so many books.
Yeah.
And I just think of so much YA and middle grade, particularly having a humorous bent. And like, do you think that teens or kids are looking for that? Like, I mean, there certainly are books that don't have that in it, but I would say in general, more than adults, I would say I see humor showing up, even in darker books.
Yeah, maybe that's true. I feel like, and I wonder, like, is that a more recent thing, or do you think I was just because
Well, even
sometimes
looking at, like, I'm going all the way back to Judy Blume. Like, her
yeah,
stuff was
Judy
funny.
Blume, totally. Well, and she was a huge influence on me.
Yeah.
I do think kids, well, yeah, I mean, kids relate to everything, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
can give kids like a super heavy book with absolutely no humor and so much bleakness, and there's going to be a certain portion of those readers who are just going to think that book is the best thing ever. And then I think, so, I mean, I guess kids are like readers anywhere, right? I mean, there's going to be kids who are going to be drawn to things that are funnier, lighter, have that combination of humor and pathos, which I think is what I do in my books. So,
I think so much of, like, we think of people sometimes having inappropriate humor at funerals and stuff like that, but I do think there's that element sometimes when things are dark that something funny kind of balances out and it almost makes it more emotional, right? That kind of back and forth. So I think sometimes things have a bigger emotional impact if you had just been laughing a few pages earlier or even a paragraph before if you laughed. And then there's something that kind of hits you right in the emotional gut. Like it just has that double impact.
I completely agree with that. And like one of my favorite writers is David Sedaris,
Yes.
and in his essays, like he will do that.
Yeah.
He'll do exactly what you said, where you will be literally laughing so hard you're crying in one paragraph, and then by the end of the next paragraph, you're still crying, but now you're legit crying. I just think I completely agree with you. Like sometimes if I read a relentlessly dark book, I just
It's
think,
just
well,
one note, right? Like it just
darkness,
feels, yeah.
yeah, Whereas if you've got me laughing and then you can get me emotional, um, yeah, I think I don't know. I love that. I love reading those sorts of books, and I like writing those sorts of books. Yeah.
That works. So, what would you advise anyone who maybe wants to add more humor? Like, do you have any suggestions or advice for that?
Yeah, it's funny. I saw, I don't know where it was. I saw like a couple of years ago, somebody was teaching like how to write, how to write
How to be
humor
funny.
workshop. Yeah, and I thought, whoa, man, can you teach that? And maybe you can. But what I would say to anybody, like when I'm writing a first draft, um, there are absolutely moments in the first draft that are already funny because I've probably thought of them for a long time, or maybe there's a set piece I've been thinking of that I know is going to go in the book that's going to be funny. Um, but a lot of what I write is just super bland in a first pass. Like it just kind of goes onto the page. And so like I guess my advice would be that that is totally okay. And then as you start going back into things um, and reworking scenes, getting to know your characters a little bit more, um, opportunities might start presenting themselves where you realize, oh, wait a
That
minute,
could be funny.
this could be funny. Yeah. Or if I did this, if I added this element into this scene, suddenly the whole dynamic changes, and this could be a very funny scene. Um, so you know, as opposed to you know, when you work in a story room, or like especially if you're on a comedy, right? And it's what is it, like the rule of threes, or like
Oh, yeah,
how many jokes you have per page, and like that would make me crazy if I was trying to write to that.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
the best advice that I heard from someone else, so I always pass it on to other people, is to figure out what it is that you find funny. And so
Oh,
the advice that someone gave to me is they're like, I actually had a free trial on that Sirius radio. When you buy a new car, they give you
uh-huh.
free Sirius for a while. And she's like, oh, there's a humor channel on that. And it was quite interesting because they'd have these kind of little short excerpts from all these different comedy albums. And there'd be somewhere it would just, for me, would totally fall flat. Like or where I'd be like, eh,
Mm,
and then others where I would laugh out loud, right? And so I
mm,
started recognizing, like, David Sedaris will make me laugh out loud. Like there are just
yeah,
certain people that, they have a certain, starting to kind of then look at like, well, what made that funny? Was it unexpected, or was it a turn of phrase? And
yeah.
like, I think you just then start to hear it, like kind of when you're looking for something, you notice it more often. I don't know if that's it or not.
Well, that's see, I think that that's good because you're actually you know, looking at things and analyzing a little bit.
That's
Uh,
my job because I teach that writing thing.
yeah,
So
exactly.
people ask me these pithy questions. I'm like, man, I don't know. You just do it. And they want more than that for their tuition dollar.
Of course they do. I know. Well, I feel like I'm not really helping you at this moment.
Well, but I think what is interesting is, and I hammer this over, like I do a lot of these interviews and it comes up a lot where I think people might be surprised is so often new writers, they write a draft of something and then they get discouraged because it's kind of like, I think as you
Mm,
said it on the
yeah,
page.
yeah.
And it was like, it was so genius in your head.
In your
Like,
brain.
and then you write it and you're like, it's not that good. And I can't take credit for this. Someone else said it. I don't even remember who, but they're like, don't compare your first draft to a published novel.
Yeah,
But I would do that all the time because I would read something and then I would try and write something and it would be like, well, it's not very good. It's like, well, but that author has probably been through 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 passes of that book
cool.
before I read it. So
Yeah,
what if I worked on it? Like, what if I did like you said? Like, what if I looked at it and was like, oh, could I change it here? Could I tweak it here? Like, oh, now that I think about it, that would be funnier if I did this other thing. I think we underrepresent how important revision is.
oh
I
my
think
god, yeah,
people, yeah,
yeah. I tell people that, you know, for me, um the 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 true skill in writing is rewriting.
yeah,
Because also, once you have a first draft, this is the other thing I would say too. When you have a first draft, even if you think it's, Anne Lamott says the shitty first draft,
Yep.
um, you have a first draft.
Yeah.
That is tremendous. You actually saw your way through to the end of a piece and you are no longer staring at a blank page.
Yeah.
This is cause to celebrate. And then put it away for a couple of weeks, then
An
bring it
important
out.
lesson. Yeah. Put it away, get some
Yeah.
space.
And go back to it. And things are going to present themselves and you are going to find ways to make it better. And you won't just do it one time, you'll have to do it a bunch of times probably before it starts to feel like, wow, you know what, this is actually starting to lift off the page. Yeah.
I don't think I used to give stuff enough space and time. Like I would get impatient and I would be like, ooh, shiny new idea. Right.
Mm,
So I would want to kind of run off and chase that other one. And
mhm,
I have come to discover that I actually really like revision because you can fix
mm.
something, right? Like you can
Yeah.
make it better. And all of a sudden you see opportunities that you didn't see before that, the first time through, it just never works that way for me. I
Yeah.
keep trying. I keep thinking people say, like, you've written a bunch of books. Like, is it easier? Um,
No.
yeah. So do you find it easier now that you've done this now multiple times?
No. No.
I think the
I
only
don't
thing
know. I
that
think
gets
in some
easier,
ways it gets harder.
yeah. Well, you know what you don't like, what needs to happen.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and the only thing I would say is easier for me is now, for example, when I'm writing a first draft, I'm at the 3/4 stage, is when I decide, and I've written now, I think it's a total of 14 books, that every time at the 3/4 stage is when I decide this book is crap. It's not worthwhile.
Yeah.
I don't know why I wanted to write it. It's no good. I don't even know how to end it anymore. It's useless. I should quit. I should start something else. I have that feeling every single time. And the only thing that's easier is now I think like, oh, there that feeling is.
Yes. That's a really good point. And I do the same thing. I have my phases within a book. And so I think what does get easier is you recognize those phases. And I actually think, like, weirdly, the reason that it sometimes feels like it gets harder is because not always, but more often, I'm able to recognize when something's not working. Whereas I think earlier on, I could blissfully go, this is great. And then it would be
Whee!
somebody else telling me,
Yeah,
wait a minute, this isn't working. Whereas now I feel, you know, I I have to try to make it work
yeah.
for my own standards before anybody else will see it, right?
Well, and
So
I also know what should be there. Like now, sometimes I'll be writing and then I'll
yeah,
suddenly pause and I'll think like, does this character have a realistic motivation? Like, what's their like? And I suddenly can get like, is there rising action? Like the other scene was kind of like, I need to have an action reaction scene sequel. Like because I've heard all these terms and because I've taught creative writing, I'm constantly thinking about sometimes the craft instead of just the story.
yeah, that can be dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Analysis paralysis.
yeah. Oh, that's good. When
Oh
I
yeah.
when I wrote for television, I took a couple of weekend long courses about screenwriting, like screenplays, like for
Yeah.
movies,
Yeah.
with Robert McKee and John Truby. Yeah, and I mean they were both great, but I and then talk about analysis paralysis. It actually really messed me up. I just, yeah, I couldn't because I'd start writing the screenplay and think, oh my god, but I don't have what's John Truby's 22 steps? I'm missing step 8 and step 15 and
Yeah.
steps, you know, steps like 17 to 19.
Yeah.
Oh,
And this should have been, if the last scene ended on a down note, this next scene should start on an up note, and I don't have this going on, and I don't, and yeah, that way lays crazy.
that Waylay's crazy, and it kind of saps away, I think, originality
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you talked like at the very beginning about this, about kind of finding your own voice. And I think that's one of the things that no one can kind of help you do. Like I definitely can look at my first two books that I wrote are definitely there's hints of my voice in there, but it's not completely my voice. They were definitely really influenced by what I was reading at that time and kind of what I was trying to write. And I wanted to be, sort of the
Right.
next Bridget Jones and,
Yeah.
Pollock series. And so I was really trying to kind of write with that. And it would only be later that it started to really be my voice.
Yeah.
And that took some time.
Yeah. It took me years for sure.
Well, you definitely nailed it because you have been nominated and you've won a whole bunch of various things and everything from the Carnegie Medal to the White Pine to the Governor General, just small, unimportant little things like that. How important do you think those awards have been to your writing career?
Well, and just, I know you did say nominated. I did win the GG. I was only nominated. I was longlisted, I think, for the Carnegie, which was obviously fantastic.
I would tell everybody that. Like, I might
Yeah.
actually get a tattoo that would
Yeah.
say, "Ask me about my nomination for the Carnegie Medal." It's right here.
Um, I did actually get a medal at the GG ceremony.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hilarious that like people apparently, if you get invited to something that says formal dress,
Yeah.
you're supposed to wear like this medal. Is that not hilarious? But of course, like I don't get in. Well, neither of us are wearing pants. I never get invited to anything where it says formal dress, and even if I did, there's no way I'm putting on the medal. Yes, I think, okay, here's what's interesting. The Reluctant Journal of Henry K. Larson won the GG in 2012. I was told by my publisher that that actually did not help with book sales,
Really?
but that it was a prestige award.
Yeah.
And so what I noticed happen after that was that I do think it garnered more attention and interest. So my next manuscript was We Are All Made of Molecules. And that was the one where my agent decided to, at that point, I didn't have a designated US publisher. Canada just had world rights. And so she broke off US rights and got me a publisher in the States as well. And I'm pretty sure that it helped that she could say, Susin Nielsen, who just won our country's, most prestigious literary award, helped to, at least get my manuscript to the top of the pile or close to. And then, once I had the US publisher, I'm pretty sure that that's what got the UK interested in having a look at me. And subsequently, I got a UK publisher. And I think in the UK, for sure, getting on that Carnegie long list was, I'm sure it was helpful. And then the Young Readers' Choice Awards, like the White Pine, the Red Maple, those are fantastic for book sales and you don't need to win, you just need to get nominated. Because then, of course, they sell tons of copies into the schools that are participating. I feel like you're just getting a reflection. You're not ever seeing my eyes in my glasses, but
I can see you.
Okay, good. Just when I look at myself. So I do think that they help in their own ways. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Well, do you think
Some
in
with
particular,
sales and
like in particular, and I've had this conversation with other people, like I think one of the differences about writing YA or middle grade is there's also sometimes, gatekeepers or people who are between the reader and you as the writer or the publisher.
yeah.
So, if you're winning those awards, like I'm wondering if like that's getting, attention from librarians or, maybe that's something where, grandma takes the list down to the local bookstore when she's looking for a present. Like if in some ways it's more important than it might be if you were writing an adult novel, a real novel.
I actually feel like we're lucky in the world of children's middle grade YA literature in that there are tons of lists and awards lists that you can get on. Whereas if you're writing a real novel, an adult novel, like if you don't get on, I've been told this by so many of my friends who write real novels, that if they, if you don't get on the Giller, the GG, or what's the other one in Canada? Is it the Writers Trust?
Yeah.
Um, you're going to have a tough time with sales. I mean, unless you're writing, if you're writing more genre, then you're just hopefully if it's good, you're going to sell a lot of books, right? So I feel like we are actually lucky because there's all these, there aren't necessarily cash prizes all the time, but there are all these opportunities to get your books out there. But you're absolutely right. Like if you can get teacher librarians on board, then that's huge.
Oh, and let's give a huge call out to teacher librarians who are
absolutely
seriously the most amazing people out there.
Yeah.
There are people. I love them.
Yeah.
So before I let you go, do you have any advice in general for people who are interested in writing for middle grades or for teens?
Well, I would say, take it seriously. Don't feel like because you're, don't think, oh, this is going to be easier because I'm writing for young people. Something I used to hear when I wrote children's books, talk about, when you were talking about the real book, I would get, oh, so you write for kids. I've always wanted to write a picture book, if only I had the time. Yeah. And I think, whoa, like they are brutal hard. So, and I don't like giving advice where I'm saying the word don't when I'm talking in negatives, but like don't moralize. Yeah. And don't condescend. I feel like kids, like I think a good middle grade YA story, or any novel for that matter, has a moral center, a moral core, but it doesn't moralize. And if you moralize, I think kids can smell that stuff a mile away.
They have such a BS detector. If you're like, hey, Susan, drugs sure are bad, aren't they?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And also I would say, I do think, one thing that you need to consider when you're writing for this age group also is that they do have good bullshit detectors. And also, they want to be engaged. And so I think pacing is really important. I think grabbing your reader, in that opening chapter and pulling them in, not meandering and sort of waiting to get to the story for 50 pages. Because by that point, again, that goes for adult novels too. If somebody takes that long, I'm putting the book down to get into the story. So, and I would say, I guess, like, try to access your emotional memories. Try to remember what it was like for you, and not necessarily to impose everything that happened to you into the story not by any stretch of the imagination. Don't write a thinly veiled memoir, but, take your characters seriously. Take what they're going through seriously. Remember what it was like for you with all of those firsts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that honesty, right? And that's what makes it, I think, work, is when people feel that authenticity.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you so much, Susan, for taking the time to talk to everybody here at the Creative Academy. And if people haven't checked out Susan and her award-winning books, they certainly should. So some of the recent titles to check out is No Fixed Address, We're All Made of Molecules, and of course, make sure you check out my favorite, Word Nerd. All right, so thank you, everyone, and take care, Susan. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Are you a member yet? Join us today and unlock a wealth of resources, masterclasses, feedback opportunities, and community events designed to help you reach the next step in your writing journey. No matter what stage you're at, we've got a helping hand to guide you along the way. Check out our free resource room if you'd like to get a taste of how we can help you reach your writing and publishing goals. Thanks for bringing us along on your writing and publishing journey. Donna, Crystal, and I hope we'll see you around the Creative Academy soon.